Namaskar and very good evening to all. Life needs a system to grow, and sometimes we need to go beyond the system. So today's topic is breaking the mold, learning beyond classroom. In the series of Education for Life, today we welcome famous bureaucrat and book author Shri Anil Swarup ji. Welcome, sir. Shri Anil Swarup ji is an Indian author and former IAS officer of UP cadre 1981 batch. He has served in various key positions for both Union government as well as government of Uttar Pradesh. Such few portfolios are like Education Secretary, Coal Secretary, Additional Secretary in the Cabinet Secretariat of India, and list is long. He has authored 2 books, Ethical Dilemma of a Civil Servant, Not Just a Civil Servant. Sir, moving towards today's topic, in the beginning I said that a mold is needed. Could you please elaborate the necessity of a mold to develop a life or to evolve as a human being?
Whether it is education or any other institution, you have to have certain ground rules, a framework within which it operates. That I would call it as a mold. But having said that, let me tell you very clearly, having been Secretary Education, Government of India, School Education, and having traveled through the country, I found that this mold varies from state to state. So the mold that operates in Kerala is that variance with mold that operates in UP. And hence, when we talk in generalities about what should be done at a national level, I'm a trifle apprehensive, because the prescription of either maintaining that mold or changing that mold or breaking that mold in Delhi may not work for the country. And that is, I think, a problem with a large number of our policies, which we design sitting in Delhi, visualizing that India is an organic whole or a single whole, where a single intervention or a group of interventions from Delhi will set the things right. What has to be really understood is the ground reality. And what I found in the 38 years as a civil servant, there is a huge disconnect between what we think in Delhi and what is there on the ground. It is only such schemes and such molds that have worked on the ground, which are connected to the ground. So when we talk in terms of breaking the mold, I think we have to keep this very clearly in mind, that whether the existing mold or the mold that we have in mind, because you have to have a mold for taking things forward, is to cater to the variations that exist in our country, more so in education, because as I said earlier, it's so very different from what is happening in Kerala as compared to UP, that sitting in Delhi, you can't visualize until you've gone for yourself and seen it. I saw that on a number of occasions. I traveled through the country, 24 states in the first 3 months, traveling deep inside to understand the mold, the ground reality. Whether there is a need for breaking the mold, we'll come to that later on. But first, you must understand the ground reality as they stand today for you to take any decision, either to break it or remold the mold.
Thank you, sir. Obviously, we need at least certain system, but that system may not fit to all. One size cannot be appropriate for everybody, because every individual being is having different necessities, needs, way of thinking. So mold is needed, and why, in what way breaking the mold is also needed?
So there would be certain areas where the existing system needs to be taken care of. Let me take a simple example in the context of the CBSE results that have come yesterday. Recently they were announced. You know what the mold is of CBSE in terms of giving examination? I was shocked when I took over as school education secretary to discover that many children had got 100 out of 100 in English literature and Hindi literature. Now Shakespeare must be turning in his grave. That's the mold we have of the CBSE. I'm talking of different molds right now. And I wrote in my book, Ethical Dilemmas of a Civil Servant, and I titled that chapter as Farcical Delusions. You're deluding the child into believing that he's perfect in English or Hindi literature, which I don't think can ever be the case. So you are deluding the child. And then I went into the details to discover further how this happens in CBSE. In CBSE, there was a system. I don't know whether it is there. I'm assuming it would be there because when I saw the results yesterday, I saw that many children got 99%, 98%. I wonder how do children get that? So that is a mold. That is one of the many molds that will need to be broken. For breaking any mold, we must understand why does an existing mold exist in the manner it has. And again, taking the same example of marks in the CBSE, I analyzed and found that the marks were escalated to enable the child to get into universities like Delhi University, which based their admission totally on the marks obtained in class 12. Now, this mold appears to have been broken. How was it broken? It was broken through the national education policy, where they determined that the admission to universities will be held through a common entrance test exam. So mold was broken, rightly so, because as I said, you delude a child into believing that he's become perfect. And when he goes further in life, that is when he joins BA or BSc, he suddenly discovers he's not perfect. And that can be pretty devastating. I've seen that in the number of children. They suddenly discover that they are nowhere close to perfection. So this sort of a farcical delusion, or the mold that provided that farcical delusion, seems to have been broken in the sense that earlier the rationale or the wrong rationale for giving higher marks has now been taken away. We still have that situation, though the CBSE is still giving 99% marks. So it baffles me. So that's sort of a mold. So what we have to do is not think in terms of a single mold that covers the entire education framework, because it's too complex and too big. We have to look at those molds that need to be re-looked at, changed. I give you one example. There could be many, many more examples. Let me give you another example, which apparently even the national education policy doesn't break. That mold should have been broken. You know, the private sector contributes phenomenally to school education in this country. Almost 50% children go to private schools. Yet we treat them as outcasts. You know, national education policy, the new one that has come, also says that school education has to be not for profit. My contention is slightly different. My contention is, why shouldn't school education be for profit? And with a simple caveat. Caveat is that the real problem in private school is the escalation of tuition fee. No? So there is a solution to that. When a child gets into a school, if at that point in time he's told this is going to be the fee for the school, and the escalation will take place on the basis of a transparent formula, I don't think anyone will have objection. The problem arises when a child gets admission into private school and then arbitrarily this fee is increased. So the arbitrariness has to go. This will take care of the private schools, and consequently, the government can tax actually the private schools, their profits, and use that money to improve government education. Now, one point which the national education policy does not talk about is, it's probably one of the finest documents that I've seen, national education policy, which attempts to break the variety of molds that exist in the present situation. Time permitting, we'll discuss that. But one problem that it does not discuss is, where and how does the government get 6% of GDP that has been prescribed for implementation of the national education policy? Where does the money come from? They don't talk about it. हमारी तरफ यूपी में कहते हैं ना, जेब में नहीं पत्ता चल दिए कलकत्ता. How do you get these ideas going without the requisite funds? One way of raising not that much fund, but some fund could have been by taxing the profit-making school education. So here is one mold that has been partly broken in terms of CBSE exam. The other mold is in the context of finances for implementing of the policy. The approach to private sector school education, that mold has not been broken. So when we talk of breaking these molds, we must first understand a variety of molds that exist as of date, and we must devise a strategy on how to break those molds. For breaking any mold, we must first understand the why of that mold. Why does that mold exist? I gave you the example in case of examinations, in case of marks, that the rationale for that mold, they have taken care of that rationale and they are planning to break that mold. In many other molds that have been attempted to be broken by the national education policy, the roadmap has not been worked out. So whereas they say that this should be done, competence-based education, this should be done, but they have not gone into the details of how of it. I mean, what they say is absolutely correct, but the point is the how. So in this country, what we don't need is the idea that the mold should be broken. It should be explained as to how it will be broken. A detailed process on what needs to be done, how it will be done, who will do it, by when it will be done. Until this is done, it will be in the realm of discussion as we are having. We'll have a great discussion. Some people will like it, some people will dislike it, and then it will be forgotten. The problem in this country is not policies. The problem is in implementation. So when we talk of breaking the mold, we must have a roadmap. First of all, understand that these are the molds need to be broken. Then we must understand why they need to be broken. Then a roadmap on how those molds to be broken. And this has to be dealt at length.
So since inception, execution is always a problem. We have great policymakers, we have great thinkers. They may sit together and bring out, a very good policy or a document. But when it comes to, execution or ground realities, there is a huge gap, and especially the policy of implementation is usually missing.
Professor, I'm sorry for interrupting here. In this country, there's no dearth of ideas. But for any idea to fructify in a democracy like ours, it has to be politically acceptable, socially desirable, technologically feasible, financially viable, administratively doable, judicially tenable, and emotionally relatable. Now, it's a handful. Now, unless you look at these 7 dimensions that I mentioned, it will flounder. It will be a great idea. We'll discuss it. Everyone will be happy, unhappy, but nothing will happen on the ground. To make it happen on the ground, these things have to be taken care of. And we must learn from the success stories that we have in this country, where things actually happened on the ground, where things changed. And that is how you change the mold. I don't think that someone has an innate wisdom to keep breaking the molds and creating new ones. We have to learn from the molds that have been broken. We have to learn where grass ceiling has been broken. We have to learn how did they do it, and then customize it to our requirement. That requires, it's a bit painful. It's not very easy. Writing a policy, you can write a document. If you are good at articulating, you'll write a document. But I remember Dr. Kasturi Rangan when he came to meet me. I was then Secretary School Education. They were formulating the policy. I told them, unless you have an action plan along with this policy, it will be meaningless. You must go into the details of how of each of the recommendations that you're giving, because by doing that, you'll realize the limitations of breaking an existing mold, why it can't be broken, and you'll also understand the limitation of creating a new mold. Without that, people will agree with what you're saying, but it will not happen on the ground.
So part 2 is desired. I think the policymakers will again meet together to create an action plan, and then subsequently for the effective implementation of NEP. As far as document is concerned, it appears to be good and useful for the society. So rightly said that delusion of perfection, every parent is attempting their child to be perfect, just perfect, be it sports or rather than living the life with joy, evolving as a good human being with great learning process. The focus is to be perfect. So the problem somewhere lies in the mindset.
I couldn't agree with you more.
Please.
The problem is primarily with parents these days. I mean, people don't discuss parents at all. The amount of pressure that the parents are putting on the child is incredible. They don't realize the fact that each child is very different from the other. They want their child to excel in everything, and that puts enormous pressure on the child without realizing that child may excel in one thing, may not excel in another thing. So he may be a good painter, good artist. He may be interested in poetry. He may not be interested in mathematics, but everyone wants his child to become an engineer or doctor. So that's the major problem. The societal pressure, primarily driven by the parents, is one of the biggest problems today in education today. I interact with a lot of schools even now. And though I have always said that teacher lies at the pivot of school education, and I'll elaborate it later on. But the real problem today is the parent, especially in urban areas. In rural areas, it's very different. And that's why I said, when you talk of molds, we have to, disaggregate this whole into a number of segments and then discuss them. So in urban areas, an educated lot or the middle class, I think parents are a real problem. In rural areas, that's not the problem. Rural areas, the problems are very different. They relate to teachers and other things. But in urban areas, I tell you, it's a shocker. The overindulgence of the parent is not merely impacting the psyche of the child, it's impacting the entire school education system, because their focus is marks. So it's not learning that is happening, it's marks that has to happen. So their obsession with marks, it rubs on the child, and he also becomes obsessed with marks. I don't know whether he's actually learning or not, but marks become the bottom line.
So that's why I was coming to the point, how to train that, how to think.
Okay, so it's not very easy. It can't be done straight away. Let's look at the various components that lead to a learning process. Various components. And let me start with the most pivotal component, that is the teacher. And when I say teacher, I'm talking of teachers primarily in government schools. I'll come to private schools later on. Now, as I have written again in my book, in both my books, I've written about school education. As I keep saying, that teacher is the pivot. Now, look at how it works now. And then once we understand the existing mold, we should be able to break that mold. Now, what is the existing mold is that these teachers who become government teachers get trained in B.Ed and D.Ed colleges. Now, I discovered during my stint the biggest mafia of school education, and that is the B.Ed and D.Ed colleges. Of the 16,000 B.Ed and D.Ed colleges, 4,000 do not exist. They're just on paper or in a room, and they can give you a degree. Now, the then chairman of All India Council for Teacher Education issued a notice to all of them to provide the information relating to their colleges on an affidavit. Why on an affidavit? Because if they give wrong information on an affidavit, there can be a criminal action against them. So these guys, these 16,000 representatives, they knew that it set the cat amongst the pigeons, and they knew there could be trouble for them. So first they tried to pull political pressure. This was warded off because I was traveling through this country. I was talking to chief ministers, and I convinced a large number of chief ministers, irrespective of the political affiliation, to be with me on getting this information to improve the B.Ed and D.Ed colleges. The details are there in my book. I am not going to it. So they could not pull the political plug, so to say. So they went to courts. They went to 17 high courts. 3 of these high courts granted stay against receipt of this information. So the chairman NCT, National Council for Teacher Education, he himself personally appeared before a high court, and the concerned high court got so angry with him that they issued a contempt notice against me and a notice to me asking me how chairman NCT could be removed. Imagine. And at that point in time, probably the support that he should have got at various levels, he did not get it. That officer, a senior, one of the finest officers, resigned from the IS. Consequently, the B.Ed and D.Ed colleges continued to grant degrees irrespective of whether they were training them or not. The good news, however, is consequent to the pressure that we put, the new education policy, the national education policy, now talks in terms of a 4-year course of B.Ed and D.Ed. So I think the problem will be sorted out. So the real problem is that the teachers are not trained before they become teachers. That's step number 1, where the mold apparently has been broken by the national education policy. And since this does not require too much financial intervention, it would happen, and probably it will happen. The second part is the selection of teachers to government jobs. This was the second mold. I don't know whether you're aware that one of the former chief ministers of a state was behind the bars very recently for a scandal in the recruitment of teachers. It's a scandal. So you have a situation where the teacher is not trained. He somehow manages to become a teacher. What sort of a teacher will he become? Now, this mold also is being attempted to be broken by the national education policy, where they talk of a different type of an entrance exam, which will be distanced from the state, and hopefully the corruption that afflicts the selection of teachers can be taken care of. This is stage 2. Then stage 3. When they do become teachers, there are a number of states where teachers don't go to the school. They are indulging in politics. A World Bank report revealed that in certain northern states, 25 to 30% teachers don't go to the school at all.
Yes.
Now, what sort of a teaching can happen if they don't go? I mean, we are talking big things today, but fundamental thing is that the teacher has to go to the school first. So this is the third stage. Then the fourth stage is you have to keep upgrading the skills of the teacher. Believe me, when I went into the details of it, there was no data at the national level to determine which teacher had gone training in which subject and which topic. No data. So what was happening was they were permanent trainees. So they went one training to another training without realizing that the purpose of training. So the numbers, the target numbers were being fulfilled, but the teachers were not getting trained. This has been taken care of through a wonderful platform called Diksha. Again, I'm not going into the details of it. So that mold has been broken, new mold created, and it's creating an impact. So teacher is a pivotal point, and I'm not going to talk about how it has been done, but these molds have been, so teacher is one continuum where it has to be done. Then the second part, which is important, is the nature of the pedagogy, how you're teaching in the class. So far, it has been primarily the rote system, Rat Liya, without understanding the concept. So conceptual understanding is important. Again, the good news is that the National Education Policy talks about it, that we have to switch over from rote learning to understanding of concepts. Hopefully it will translate, but it can translate only if the teachers are capable of doing that. And the other hindrance could be that the obsession with marks. Now, obviously, if the nature of the questions undergo a change and they are assessing the competitive abilities of a child, the competence of a child as against their rote learning. So if that is going to be done, the marks that they will obtain will come down to begin with, because as they learn, it will improve. That will be a very difficult change to happen, because parents today are not accepting anything less than, I remember when I did my high school or intermediate, I thought I had done reasonably well, but I was nowhere near 90-95%. I mean, today, the marks that I may have got in high school and intermediate, I like to hide somewhere, because I can never reveal those marks to anybody. They'll say he's a grossly incompetent guy. So there is something
has been raised now.
And the professor, we must understand. And someone told me, why it is happening? Because in this farce, the student is happy, the teacher is happy, the principal is happy, the parents are happy, the politicians are happy, the state governments are, everyone is happy. So why are you making them unhappy? So that is why I call it farcical delusion. You do that. So there are a number of aspects, or I would say number of molds that have to be broken or remolded for education to improve in this country.
Rightly said, a teacher is having a pivotal role, and the end of the string, teacher is the first one to begin with. If they understand the whole process, the mechanism, the process of imparting the knowledge, I think that will lead to a final solution. In the beginning, we have already discussed about the different needs, for different human beings. If you can throw some more light on that part also, because ultimately every human being needs to contribute towards the society. Somebody will become a painter or a musician or a doctor or a CA or a service provider in any sense. So there are different needs for the society, as well as different personality attributes and skills are needed from an individual being. So if you can elaborate more on that part.
So what we have to do is we have more than the needs of the society, which comes much later. You have to look at the fundamental learning of a child. Fundamentals will have to be there in every child. I don't have to start thinking that this guy is born, okay, he should become a NIS officer or an engineer or a doctor. No, that comes a bit later in. School education cannot start by making an engineer. School education has to be based on basic fundamental skills that have to be imparted, fundamental learnings that have to be imparted, which will be of use to him in whichever profession that he occupies. So again, education policy talks brilliantly about it. I think this is the finest chapter of the education policy, where they talk in terms of how the child has to evolve in the beginning. So they lay emphasis on his skills, on his competence, all is there. And I would suggest that's the right way of going about it. It is at a slightly later stage when he comes to 7th, 8th, or 9th class. Then we start thinking in terms of where the child fits in. Even now, I'm not looking at the society as a whole. I'm looking at the child first. Because without understanding what can the child do, I unnecessarily start molding what the society requires, would be wrong. Exactly. So let's look at the child first. So some child may have inclination towards developing vocational skills. Sometimes some children may have, inclination towards science or art subjects. It is at that age, 9, 10th, 11th, 12th, that we start discovering the child more in terms of which career that he could adopt and train him accordingly. There again, I think the education policy does a wonderful job. It brings back the focus on skilling the child, on vocational education. Instead of pushing every child to study history, geography, or science, and becoming good for nothing after he done his BA or BSc, he's nobody. You skill him at least then he becomes employable. So the exposure to the child during the initial part of his education to these vocational skills will enable him to determine whether that is the way that he wants to go. Right now, traditionally also in this country, we always believed everything done with the mind is better than anything done with the hand. That's the usual traditional understanding. This mold was to be broken, and national education policy has actually broken that mold by putting vocational education on the same pedestal as the other commerce, science and arts and humanities. So I think that's a great development which allows the child to choose. Now, of course, there will be other factors like parental pressure and societal pressure, but at least now he has a choice to make in terms of, and from the societal point of view also, it will be better rather than, as I said earlier, becoming just a graduate and doing nothing. Here he'll be much more employable. Now, right now, I'm not touching on the quality of what is being imparted. I'm saying that is how it should be. Now, as he goes up the ladder, that is, he goes to class 11, 12, then, of course, it will have to be determined what the society requires. Then the demand comes in. For example, even for vocational training, you have to decide whether he should be trained to become a mechanic, whether he should be a domestic help, or whether he should go into the hotel industry. It will depend on the local demand. And that's where I think skilling, where what went wrong in this country was, first of course, there was no skilling, but then skilling itself was not demand-based. So you have a skilled worker for whom there is no demand. So, for example, I went to Odisha in one of the visits in the interior areas, and they told me, sir, you are teaching everyone IT. Now, what is IT to do here? Here we require people who can help in, hospitality industry or other industries. So you have to look at the local. So then we started what we called a district level survey to determine as to what is the demand there, and then train the people accordingly. So first, in the initial years of the child, my understanding is don't worry too much about the demand. Get some fundamentals corrected, soft skills there, which could be of use wherever he goes. And then you look at the demand and train him in a specific area. That's how it should work.
Right. So now we have been, pressing the pressure of, scoring high 90 and 99, even 99 is less for many parents. So the traditional education system was not, the time you have mentioned, 60s might be, the parents used to be happy on that our child is happy, they regularly going to school or college. And as and when he comes back home, he is not having any pressure. He's go-getter. He's living his life ultimately. So this competency-based education system, I think they're killing our childhood. They're killing us as a human being. So, the opinion difference may be there. There are certain advantages also of competency-based education system, and vice versa, traditional education system. Your take, both the systems are having plus and minus.
So, it's not as stark as you say. I wouldn't call it a competence-based education system, because what has been prevalent in this country so far, till the national education policy came, and probably it will transform it, was not competence-based education actually. It was purely to get good marks in the examination. How to get good marks. That's the key. And that's the problem. So it will be wrong to call it a competence-based school education system. No, it is not. If it were a competence-based school education system, then probably that would not have been much of a problem. It's a marks-based. So the entire pressure on the child is to get marks somehow, anyhow. Not many parents realize, and I'm digressing a bit, that in the long run, these marks don't matter at all. Today, I address a lot of seminars, webinars, and conferences. And even today, you read out my CV. You did not mention that I got 68% marks in class 6 and 72% in class 7. You don't. Yet we are so obsessed with it. This is something which needs to be told to the parents by people who've succeeded in life. Yes, marks. I'm not saying marks are not important at all. What I'm saying is, don't be obsessed with marks.
Obsession of marks.
The obsession with marks is a real problem. And once it is demonstrated to these parents by those that have succeeded in life, that yes, they had good marks, but they were not dying for marks. Today, I'm sorry for using this phrase. They could go to any extent to get their marks, which is a shocker. So the problem with the existing education, at least in this limited context, is not with competence-based learning or not. It is with our obsession with somehow anyhow getting marks. And that is what that led to farcical delusion in CBSE. So that needs to be taken care of. And I would now believe, and I believe when I became education secretary, that more than the child, it is the parents who require a lot of counseling. And some schools have actually, I have been going to some of the schools to talk to parents. Now, I'm a bureaucrat, and my stint in education was only 20 months. Yet many schools call me to talk to parents, to convey to them, yes, it is important to take care of your child, but don't be obsessed with numbers. You are unnecessarily putting so much pressure. So what the education system in urban areas, I'm repeating it again and again, because this is a middle class urban area phenomenon. It's not in this. Nowhere in the village do you find an overbearing parent, pushing him hard. No, it doesn't. It's totally different there. But in urban areas, especially I live in Delhi, in Noida, it's crazy.
Sure. So now moving towards, we have talked a lot about the school education system. And of course, teachers and parents, two fulcrums are there. They need to start rethinking about, addressing the future needs and to make the system better. Now coming to higher education system, in higher education system, in Western world, lot many lateral entry schemes are there. There is no fixed formula that you complete your education by 22 or 25 years, like that. People, they join a school, they drop out, then they start working, and later on they realize that they want to, acquire more skills or degree. They pursue their college education. It is quite open and it is acceptable for the society as well. So coming to Indian context, in what way the higher education system needs to be addressed for non-traditional learners, especially?
At the outset, let me confess that my exposure to higher education is extremely limited. I never handled that as a sector. My understanding is what I have read here and there a bit about higher education. So please pardon my ignorance in the context of higher education. My understanding of higher education, because I used to be a part of some of the discussions that took place in the ministry was the same for higher education. I used to participate in some of the discussion, and my understanding is based on some of the discussions that I had with them. I think my understanding is that we are educating the child for the sake of education, perhaps not even for the sake of education. Since he doesn't have anything to do, he joins BA, which is a tragedy. The purpose stands defeated. He is neither getting educated, nor does he become employable. So to me, either it is pure academics where he looks at improving his understanding of a particular area, that is understandable, that happens world over, but primarily it has to be employable. If I can't make a child employable after his higher education, then the higher education is a waste of time. Why is he at all entering into that higher education field? And that is why I think I like the focus of the national education policy on vocational education, where he upfront decides whether he wants to learn more, no harm in learning more. But if there are hundreds of people learning more without delivering anything, then there is a major issue. So the good news is that the national education policy recognizes this fact that everyone going into the higher education doesn't make any sense. He should decide after class 12. For example, now he has to decide whether if he wants to become a teacher, he has to decide after class 12 because it's a 4-year B.Ed course. So he takes that. So this is one major problem where almost everyone jumps on, because higher education in India is fairly cheap. So everything's subsidized. I mean, personally speaking, I would not go in for subsidy for higher education. If you want to give scholarship to deserving candidates or to anybody, do. It should be specific to an individual rather than an institution. Right now, we do across the board subsidy. So the guy, at least in Delhi, comes in a Honda in Delhi University, attends the class, goes back in a Honda, and shouts slogans if the fee is raised beyond 100 rupees. So this is crazy. It should not be done. My contention is higher education should be, I'm not saying don't provide scholarships to the needy. Please do that. But don't do it across the board. That is one. That's extremely, extremely important. If that doesn't happen, we won't have money for investing. We'll keep opening universities. The second comes to the quality of higher education. I mean, we've seen quality of school education pretty pathetic in some places, but good in other places. Quality of higher education. You know, I'm sorry to say that I have been visiting Delhi University since I was a student. I was not a student here in Delhi University. I used to come here for debating and cultural festivals. And what I see now, I feel sad. The classes, the teaching, the time that is invested, something going wrong. And this, I'm talking of one of the finest universities in the country. No, if you drive down from here to Mathura, you'll find so many engineering.
I think there is some network issues. Anil sir, could you please rejoin? Some technical interruption is there. Let us try to reconnect Anil Swarup ji. Yes, I think there was some technical glitch.
There was some technical glitch, so we're back. So yes, what I was suggesting was that the quality has to be taken care of. Here again, the national education policy has some good news. And there we talk in terms of how UGC has to be unbundled. Right now, UGC does everything, right from funding to regulation, everything done by UGC. I think the funding regulation has to be segregated. I was personally of the view, and I'm glad that the national education policy says that. Hopefully, that will lead to some improvement of quality of education. So, to me, the quality of education that is being imparted, both in colleges as well as technical institutes, leaves a lot to be desired. The guy who comes out of that college, does he have the requisite knowledge or skills to participate in anything? I'm sorry to say that a large number of colleges don't have that.
Right, sir. So, apart from your administrative responsibilities, you evolve as an author. You sing, you play guitar. Many other activities are there which has influenced your life. So, your take on the importance of learning beyond the curriculum.
I would believe that curriculum itself has to be re-engineered. That's the mold that needs to be broken. So long as we keep these activities as extracurricular activities, I think focus, because again, you don't get marks. Everyone is hassled about marks. Now that we have so many opportunities available in segments like sports or even in cultural activities, I mean, the opportunities are emerging every day. I think they have to become a part of the curriculum. So that's very important until you make them as a part of curriculum. As far as I was concerned, I had believed very early in my life that I have to develop as an overall person. I can't be merely studies. And I have discovered in my life, 38 years as a servant, that it helped me to have other aspects to human existence, to my existence, whether it was music or sports. It helped you become a much more rounded person rather than merely intellectually indulging in something and getting great marks. I'm not very sure whether the brightest of the lot make best of people in society and in life, contribute most. Yes, it's nice to be bright, but if you are not a rounded person, then you could be a misfit in a society. So I think these so-called extracurricular activities, which I think should become a part of the curriculum, is extremely, extremely important for an individual to be rounded. I mean, I jokingly used to tell everyone that in civil service, we face a lot of music. So I decided to create my own music. I couldn't have done that if I was not fond of music. So I was literally and otherwise creating my own music, and that helped me. Secondly, it helped me absorb a lot of pressure. Because if you are not exposed to these sorts of activities, absorption of pressure becomes very difficult. So today, everyone talks about emotional intelligence. No? So to me, that comes by associating yourself with activities beyond the so-called existing curriculum, beyond the marks. So if you are a sportsman, I think the chances are that you have leadership qualities in you, because most of these sports are team sports. So in a team, you try to understand, to play along with it. Others' victory is your victory. You share your victories, you share your griefs, and so that helps you in life. So life is much beyond getting marks in the examination.
Right. So curriculum, the line of curriculum needs to be expanded, and things which are right now an extra, they should be in the package itself. I think.
No, please don't mistake me for removal of chapters in history, because
No, I'm not suggesting any removal.
Sometimes today, changing of curriculum means that you remove certain chapters of history and add some more chapters of history.
No, we're not at all going towards that direction. The only thing right now, whatever things we have kept as extra, they are essential parts of life, and helping a student for the future needs. So that extra word needs to be removed. It should be incorporated within the syllabus curriculum.
Professor, there is an issue here. Issue is that almost everyone wants his area to be included in the curriculum. Okay. And yet everyone wants the size of the bag to come down. It's a bit of a dilemma. It's not very easy. It's not very easy, but it can be done. If it is not done appropriately, then what will happen is the essential may just go out. Or some ideologies may come in to delete a particular part of curriculum, which is essential part of curriculum. So that's a very dangerous way of touching this. So when we talk in terms of creating a new mold or breaking the existing mold, we have to be very careful. We have to be very careful, and it has to be looked at it objectively, not through the prism of your personal ideology or your party's ideology to break the mold. Because I'll tell you, it's easy to break the mold. It's very difficult to create one. Destruction is very easy. You can do that. But once you do that, especially in education, you have to be very, very careful. You are impacting very impressionistic mind, the youngster. If you put it differently, or if you try and push your own ideology in the name of breaking the mold, then we could be in serious trouble for a long time to come. The tragedy of our existence here is, and I had that personal experience, that not many politicians are interested in education. And the reason is very simple, because they are bothered about yesterday, today, and tomorrow. They're not bothered about what happens 5 years, 10 years down the line, most of them. If that be the case, education impacts not tomorrow. Education will impact 5 years, 10 years down the line. So the breaking of mold has to be very carefully done. If you break the right mold, then reconstructing that mold will be very, very difficult.
Just for the sake of breaking and creating new cannot help. You need to give a serious thought on that part. So innovation, this is the buzzword, new buzzword in education system. Earlier it was adoption. So, understanding adoption as well as innovation in the context of education, and ultimately with the point of view of life.
See, the pace of human existence has increased. And one of the principal drivers to this change is technology. And in order to keep pace with the technological developments, it is important to think on your feet. Because if you don't do that, if you don't continue to innovate, then you will not be able to keep pace. So whereas you cannot totally be oblivious of the changes or oblivious of your existing situation, you have to take that into account. You have to think innovatively out of the box, both in terms of what needs to be taught, how it needs to be taught. All this has to be done at a much faster pace now than ever before. Hence, innovation is the key to success now. So not only should the policymakers or the framework makers have to innovate, I think the child has to be evolved in a manner. He should think in a manner to think out of the box, to innovate. That is the flavor of the day, and rightly so, because as I said, things are moving so fast that if you're not up to it, then you'll be left behind.
Right. So now coming to your personal journey, in what way the out of classroom activities, maybe leisurely sitting in the lawns or at tea shop or being with the friends, in what way it has helped you to evolve as a human being better than yesterday?
Right from my school days, I was very fond of sports. I played almost every game. And over a period of time, I became a debater. I started writing and directing plays. I developed a liking for music. I was doing almost everything and I enjoyed everything. I mean, the key factor was enjoyment, whether I was enjoying it or not. And I enjoyed it so thoroughly. And even now, I love music. I don't have much time, or now physically, I'm not in a position to play too many games now. But I enjoyed it almost all the time. So much so that in class 12, when I was selected for the state school team for basketball, I had to give that up because my examinations were around the corner. So I had to give that up. So sometimes you have to make those choices. But more than anything else, it helped me evolve as an individual. As I keep saying, a much more rounded personality, a team person, in some situations as a leader. So it helped me evolve that way. It also helped me in some way to improve my communication skills. I distinctly remember when I did my class 12 and I had science subjects, and in science subjects beyond sine squared theta, cos squared theta, I hardly had time to improve my communication skills. So I did that post class 12. I worked on my communication skills, became a debater myself. So, it was fun because I was looking to become a debater. It was not merely the exercise of purely communication skills. There was an objective behind it. I wanted to become a debater. And that in turn helped me improve my communication skills, both in English and Hindi. So I enjoyed those so-called extracurricular activities. And that helped me relax myself and then focus on studies when I did that. So what I did was I focused on whatever I did. So if I was studying, I was very focused on studies. If I was playing, I was focused on playing. So focus was the key as far as I was. And second, I think it helped me evolve time management. I'm benefiting from it even now. Right through my career, I benefited because I used to manage my time very well. Everything was planned, so to say. Even the rest was planned. A movie was planned. It was not just like that. There were occasions when we did that, but by and large, I planned everything. That made life very easy. So if you have multiple sets of activities, you start understanding the importance of what you're doing and what you're not doing. And you take rational decisions in terms of what you should do, which is good for you. So for me, playing games was a sort of relaxation, apart from the other skills that I was developing. So it helped me evolve as an individual. It helped me understand the world much better because the world is much beyond the books that you read. It made me understand human beings much better because when you interact with human beings, because ultimately in 38 years of my civil service, it was primarily managing men and women. So my association with sports and cultural activities helped me develop those capabilities to manage men and women in a manner to get the best out of them. So ultimately, it boils down to getting the best out of your team, no? And these so-called soft skills you develop if you participate in extracurricular activities like sports, games, cultural activities.
So now, coming to your journey of writing a book, in what way, was it there in the back of the mind during your services that one day I'll start doing, or, post services, you started exploring your hidden talent?
Professor, when I was in service, I was a very avid reader. I used to read about 100 books a year, even as a civil servant. I was very avid reader. And hence I had this desire that I must have at least one book in my name. I didn't have too many desires in life. I was enjoying every moment that I was going, but I did have this desire of having one book. So I started working on my first book, not just as civil servant, while in service. But I couldn't have got it published while in service because I was critical of certain aspects of the government and it would have gone against the code of conduct. So after I retired, within, I think, 8 months, I got my first book, Not Just a Civil Servant, published. The second book, Ethical Dilemmas of Civil Servant, was not in my mind to begin with. I used to go to the academy to talk to my colleagues, to deliver talks to them of various seniorities. And I discovered one thing. I discovered that when a civil servant joined the service in the beginning, the IS, he was very enthusiastic. He wanted to do things. He wanted to change the world. But as he went up the ladder, he became cynical. He started blaming everyone else for his inability to do things. And that made me write my second book, Ethical Dilemmas of a Civil Servant, wherein I basically point out that if a civil servant does want then he can do a lot of things irrespective of this set of circumstances. In fact, my book starts with a couplet. It says, मुख्तसर सी जिंदगी के अजब से अफसाने हैं, या तीर भी चलाने हैं, परिंदे भी बचाने हैं. So this is the quintessential dilemma that I describe. But through the book, I explain that despite this dilemma, you can do a lot of good work because it has been done. And I conclude the book by this couplet. खुदी को कर बुलंद इतना कि हर तकदीर से पहले खुदा बंदे से कुछ पूछे, बता तेरी रजा क्या है. So this was my second book. Then the third book. You mentioned about 2, I've already written 3. The third is No More a Civil Servant. This was more of an accident, so to say. I had some health situation in 2021. I fell sick. I was confined to the bed. I could barely walk. I had become very weak. To utilize that time, I wrote my third book, No More a Civil Servant. That was my third book. And that was basically in a slightly different tone. The tone of that book was that so much good is happening around us that we are not noticing that good. And then we become very negative. If we are positive in our frame, we can notice that good. We can seek inspiration from the good. We can replicate that good. We can scale that good. And this has also become a foundation for the foundation that I've set up, Nexus, a good foundation, where we are trying to promote goodness and good work. My fourth book is now on the anvil, and that book is My Encounters with Politicians.
Great, sir.
So I enjoy writing. First book took a lot of time, but the books thereafter did not take much time. I write 3 columns every week. So I spend a lot of time in writing. Great. And I enjoy that.
Great, sir. जैसे बचपन में मैंने एक कहानी पढ़ी थी कि एक टोकरी में सेब रखे होते हैं और उसमें एक खराब सेब होता है, तो बाकी सेब को भी खराब कर देता है. तो मेरे दिमाग में तब आया था कि भाई एक बुराई ने बाकी अच्छे को खराब कर दिया. उल्टा भी हो सकता था कि एक सारे अच्छे सेब मिलके एक बुरे को अच्छा कर देते. तो वो एक फिनोमेना है नेक्सस ऑफ गुड. जैसे बुराई प्रोपोगेट होती है, ऐसे अच्छाई भी प्रोपोगेट होती है. आदिकाल से ही हम देखते आ रहे हैं कि हो सकता है 10% लोग ऐसे हैं जो अच्छे की श्रेणी में हम रख सकते हो या बाकी नहीं, लेकिन फिर भी जिंदगी चलती रहती है. इस एस्पेक्ट पर कि अच्छा होना डिस्पाइट ऑफ evils in the society, one should not leave doing good. उस पॉइंट पर मैं चाहूंगा कुछ अच्छी व्याख्या की जाए.
देखिए, मेरे करियर के अंतिम 2 वर्ष सेक्रेटरी एजुकेशन के रूप में गुजरे, तो उस समय मुझे ये मौका मिला कि मैं देश का भ्रमण कर सकूं. मैं पहले भी भ्रमण करता था, लेकिन इसका नजरिया थोड़ा भिन्न था. तो मैं कई जगहों पर गया. इंटीरियर एरिया में गया. मैं एक स्कूल में गया जो कि एक इंटीरियर एरिया में महाराष्ट्र में था. उस जगह का नाम पस्तेपाड़ा. मुझे बताया गया कि उस गवर्नमेंट प्राइमरी स्कूल में बिजली नहीं है. तो मैंने कहा कि आज की तारीख में बिजली ना होना तो विचित्र बात है, मैं विजिट करूंगा स्कूल को. तो करीब 80-90 किलोमीटर दूर है थाने हेडक्वार्टर से. मैं गया. तो टीचर को पता था, वो मुझे लेकर अंदर गया क्लास में. 2 रूम का स्कूल था. क्लास में जैसे ही मैं घुसा तो आई वाज प्लेजेंटली शॉक्ड. मैंने देखा हर बच्चे के पास टैबलेट था और एक स्मार्ट स्क्रीन लगा हुआ. तो मैंने उससे पूछा, बिजली कहाँ से आती है तुम्हारे पास? तो बिजली है नहीं. तो मुझे वो पीछे ले गया दोनों को. उसने दिखाया मुझे फोल्डेबल सोलर पैनल्स, जिससे वो बैटरी चार्ज कर रहा था. तो बैटरी से वो अपने टैबलेट चार्ज करता. मेरा दूसरा प्रश्न था कि पैसा कहाँ से आया तुम्हारे पास? तो उसने कहा कि साहब, जब मैं यहाँ आया था तो मेरे पास एक सेकंड हैंड लैपटॉप था. यहाँ 40-50 बच्चे थे, उसमें कुछ आते थे कुछ नहीं आते थे. मेरे समझ में नहीं आया मैं क्या करूं. मैं जहां पर रहता हूँ थोड़ी बहुत इंटरनेट रहता था. मैं वहां एजुकेशनल वीडियोस डाउनलोड करता था और स्कूल में आके बच्चों को दिखाता था. बच्चों चारों तरफ इकट्ठे होकर देखते थे. 2 महीने बाद करीब 20 उनके पेरेंट्स आ गए स्कूल. कहते हैं, मास्टर जी, पहले तो बच्चे स्कूल जाते नहीं थे, भागते हैं स्कूल की तरफ, आपने क्या किया? तो उन्होंने बताया कि भाई मैंने लैपटॉप किया, शायद इससे शायद ये लोग, इनको मजा आता है. तो देखा पेरेंट्स थोड़े इंटरेस्टेड हैं. तो उन्होंने कहा कि साहब आप लोग 500 रुपए देंगे, मैं 2 टैबलेट लाना चाहता हूँ. तो उनको शायद समझ में नहीं आया टैबलेट. उन्होंने समझाया क्या. गरीब लोग थे, लेकिन उन्होंने किसी तरह के जुगाड़ करके दिए पैसे. वो 2 टैबलेट लाके उसने लैपटॉप के साथ लगा दिया. जो टीचर की जो पैशन था उसकी लोगों को जानकारी होने लगी आसपास. तो एक CSR फंडिंग एजेंसी और एक NGO वहां पहुंचा स्कूल में, और उसने जब टीचर से बात की तो बड़े इंप्रेस्ड हुए टीचर से. ये बड़ा पैशनेट आदमी है, परिस्थितियां इतनी खराब है लेकिन वो अपना लगा हुआ है. तो उन्होंने इसको फंड किया, टैबलेट को और स्मार्ट स्क्रीन को. उसी के आसपास मैं पहुंचा. मैंने जब देखा तो मैं भी बहुत इंप्रेस्ड उससे. मैंने उसके साथ एक फोटो लिया, और संदीप कुंड है उस टीचर का नाम, और वो ट्वीट कर दिया मैंने. जब ट्विटर पे किया हो तो आसपास के स्कूल वाले वहां आने लगे देखने के लिए क्या कर रहा है. अच्छा, तो वो अपने यहाँ भी कुछ करने लगे. इस बीच रामनाथ कोविंद साहब प्रेसिडेंट बने इंडिया के। तो मैं उनसे कर्टसी कॉल में गया मिलने, सेक्रेटरी था मैं गवर्नमेंट का। तो क्योंकि एक कप चाय पी रहे थे, कुछ टाइम था, तो मैंने ये नरेट किया इंसिडेंट संदीप गुंड का। तो बड़े इंप्रेस लगे मुझे। तो मैंने कहा आप मिलना चाहेंगे संदीप गुंड से? बोले व्हाई नॉट। तो मैं संदीप गुंड को दिल्ली बुलाया, उसकी भेंट हुई प्रेसिडेंट से, एक फोटो खींची और संदीप गुंड नेशनल हीरो बन गया। लेकिन कहानी आनी समाप्त हुई। जो पस्ते पाड़ा का जो मॉडल था डिजिटल एजुकेशन का, आज की तारीख में 50,000 स्कूल से ज्यादा महाराष्ट्र में स्थापित हो गया है, और इसके लिए एक भी पैसा सरकार ने नहीं दिया। 250-300 करोड़ रुपए क्राउड फंडिंग से आया। तो इससे मुझे आइडिया लगा कि अगर अच्छी बात की जाए तो वो बात बढ़ सकती है, और अच्छे लोग से जुड़ सकते हैं, और वो एक्सपैंड हो सकती है। इसी आधार पर मैंने नेक्सस ऑफ गुड शुरू किया कि हम मुक्त कंठ से बुराई करते हैं, मुक्त कंठ से तारीफ क्यों नहीं करते? If all the rascals and ruffians of the world can come together and make life difficult for us, why shouldn't good people come together and make life good for everyone and let goodness grow? With this in mind, I started this movement called Nexus of Good. By God's grace, the movement is doing very well. There are thousands of members, there are thousands of followers. We have 15-16 city chapters. We have regular events. Last year हमारा annual awards हुआ था, इस साल हमारा annual award 30 सितंबर को होने जा रहा है, फिक्की में होगा। तो हम ऐसे लोगों को रिवॉर्ड करते हैं जिससे ये स्थापित हो सके कि गुड कैन बी डन बिकॉज इट इज बीइंग डन। ना हम हवा की बात नहीं करते, हम आइडियाज की बात नहीं करते, हम आइडिएट करते हैं एक अच्छे काम से। तो नेक्सस ऑफ गुड आइडियाज नहीं डिस्कस करता, नेक्सस गुड देखता अच्छा काम हुआ है, क्या इस अच्छे काम को कहीं और किया जा सकता है, क्या इसको स्केल किया जा सकता है, ये इसका उद्देश्य है। यही मेरा मानना है कि चूंकि समाज में अच्छा काम हो रहा है इसलिए और अच्छा काम हो सकता है। चूंकि हम सब लोगों को मसाला इतना पसंद है, सब नेगेटिव बात करते हैं। अब इसको थोड़ा परिवर्तन करने में टाइम लगेगा। एक दिन आदमी को अनुभूति होने लगे इस बात की कि अच्छा काम हो रहा है, खुद को अच्छा लगे, तो फिर वो बात करेगा। वो अनुभूति एक बार जो पावे वही जाने, एक बार किसी तरीके से उसको जताना है, फिर वो करने लगता है वो अच्छी बात से उसके प्रफुल्लित महसूस करता है। अब मैं हर हफ्ते कॉलम लिखता हूं उसमें नेक्सस गुड पे।
ब्यूटीफुल सर। लाइफ, दो बातें मुझे इंपॉर्टेंट आज समझ में आई। एक तो लाइफ में फोकस बन जाए, ऐसी तमाम चीजें करते रहनी चाहिए, और दूसरा जीवन का अल्टीमेट उद्देश्य जो है आनंद पूर्वक यात्रा करना है और लोगों के साथ जुड़ना है। लोगों को दिए से दिया जलाने की बात है। जाते जाते मैं जो हमारी बात शुरुआत में जब शुरू हुई थी कि प्रॉब्लम की जड़ कहीं ना कहीं पेरेंट्स का माइंडसेट है, ऑब्सेशन फॉर द मार्क्स है, और सब समाधान में पेरेंट्स भी हैं और टीचर भी इसमें जुड़े हुए हैं। अब बाकी सारे सोसाइटी, पॉलिटिशियंस, ब्यूरोक्रेट्स, मैकेनिज्म, सिस्टम, डिफरेंट काउंसिल्स, वो सब दे आर इन सपोर्ट टू दीज टू पीपल, पेरेंट एंड टीचर। मैं पेरेंट की समस्या पर मैं निजी अनुभव के साथ में भी बात साझा करना चाहूंगा कि कहीं ना कहीं वो जो माइंडसेट है सिक्योरिटी और सेफ्टी ड्रिवन है, उसके लिए ऑब्सेशन है कि ये भूखा ना मरे, ये एम्प्लॉयबल हो जाए, पहला। दूसरा, कंपटीशन बेस्ड है। हमारी इंसानी जो फितरत है, जो हमारे 5 बैड एलिमेंट्स हमने शुरू से हमारे शास्त्रों में कहे गए हैं, उसमें ईर्ष्या की जो हमारे बात है। तो जब अंदर की यात्रा की बजाय हम बाहर की तरफ देखते हैं और आसपास के माहौल में देखते हैं कि उसके बच्चे ने ये कर लिया, एक पैटर्न है, उसने इस स्कूल से पढ़ाई की, फिर ये वाली कोचिंग की, फिर ये पढ़ाई की, फिर वो आज फला देश में इतने डॉलर कमा रहा है। सो सक्सेस के जो पैरामीटर्स हैं, ये जिंदगी के मंतव्य हैं, उद्देश्य हैं, वो कहीं ना कहीं वहां पर अटेम्प्ट करने की आवश्यकता है। जब एक बार उसको एड्रेस कर देंगे कि अल्टीमेटली आपकी यात्रा मतलब जीवंतता से भरी हुई है, हर पल को आपने इतनी सारी अपनी बात स्कूल, कॉलेज से लेकर के और अभी तक की यात्रा के बारे में बातें बताई, बहुत इंस्पायरिंग है। लेकिन मैं फिर भी एक पेरेंट जो ऑलरेडी एक माइंडसेट है वर्षों पुराना, उसको कैसे धीरे धीरे हम कुरेचें, उससे बाहर निकलें और फिर एक चेंज की शुरुआत हो सके।
उसका तरीका ये है कि आप ऐसे लोगों को प्रेजेंट करें जो इसके लिए ऑब्सेस नहीं थे और जीवन में सक्सेसफुल हुए। देखिए बाकी सब ज्ञान है, आपको उदाहरण प्रस्तुत करने होंगे ऐसे लोगों के जो मार्क्स के लिए ऑब्सेस नहीं थे और जीवन में सक्सेसफुल हुए, और उनसे समझना पड़ेगा वो कैसे सक्सेसफुल हुए। वे बिना उसको डेमोन्स्ट्रेट किए हुए सिर्फ बात करने से काम नहीं चलेगा। तो जब चर्चा होती है तो उसको समझ में आता है कि जरूरी नहीं है कि मार्क्स के लिए आप पागल हो जाएं, और ये भी एग्जाम्पल दें कि मार्क्स के लिए ऑब्सेशन नॉट नेसेसरली ट्रांसलेट इनटू सक्सेस। जब ये चीज समझ में आने लगेगी पेरेंट को, तो धीरे धीरे परिवर्तन आएगा।
ब्यूटीफुल सर। सरलता से आपने बात कही, संक्षिप्त में कही, और बहुत ही हमेशा की तरह आनंददायी अनुभव रहा संवाद करना, एक सुधी जन से बात करना। आपने इतनी किताबें पढ़ी और हमने 1 घंटे में उतनी किताबों का सारांश आपसे पा लिया है। वी एक्सटेंड अवर थैंक्स टू यू फॉर बीइंग विद अस for last 1 hour and sharing so many wonderful stories, phenomena, principles and practices as well. और उम्मीद करते हैं आगे भी फिर जब आपकी चतुर्थ किताब जब उसका पब्लिकेशन होगा तो आपसे एक संवाद का फिर से मौका मिलेगा, और उस पर फिर अगले प्रोग्राम में हम सिर्फ आपके लिटरेरी एक्टिविटीज पर ही चर्चा करेंगे। हर बुक के बारे में 15-15 मिनट का समय निकालेंगे। उम्मीद है आप उसके लिए समय निकाल पाएंगे।
थैंक यू, नमस्कार।
थैंक यू सर, एंड थैंक यू आवर व्यूअर्स। और इसी महीने के आखिर में फिर एक और प्रोग्राम हम करेंगे, और उसकी जल्दी ही सूचना हम हमारे सोशल मीडिया प्लेटफॉर्म पर देंगे। आज के लिए बस इतना ही। थैंक यू वंस अगेन। नमस्कार।